Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. For today's video, I'm going to do another fact to film looking at the movie The Haunting of Connecticut. And we're going to call this fact to film because there's some discrepancies with the story behind that movie. The Haunting of Connecticut came out in 2009 and was directed by Peter Cornwell and written by Adam Simone and Tim Metcalf. And the movie starts with the claim that it's based on true events, so let's talk about those events. In 1986, in Southington, Connecticut, the Snedeker family, consisting of Alan and Carmen Snedeker and their 3 sons and 1 daughter, moved into a new home. That home used to be a funeral parlor, which is confirmed by the children finding old tools down in the basement. And like any creepy house story, shortly after moving in, the family started experiencing some odd things. Items in the home would go missing. They claimed that they were seeing strange people in their house, but when they looked again, they weren't there. And even one of the sons was going through a major personality shift that got him diagnosed as schizophrenic. And after a few months of things starting to escalate, Carmen and Alan, the 2 parents of the family, started claiming that they were getting raped and sodomized in their sleep by demons. And that is when they decided to seek help from Ed and Lorraine Warren. And you may remember Ed and Lorraine Warren. They are a famous paranormal investigating couple. I talked about them briefly when I discussed the Amityville horror case, and they also are the inspiration behind the Annabelle movies. They found the original Annabelle doll and had her in their possession for a little bit before they passed away. The original Annabelle doll is now on display in a glass case. And while they were a famous paranormal investigating couple, you do have to take everything that they said with a little bit or a lot of salt. So after the Snedeker family reached out to Ed and Lorraine Warren, they decided they were pretty much just going to move into the home with them. That way they can get the full demonic experience. And after a while living in the home, they pretty much declare that the previous owners, the ones that owned the funeral home, were practicing necromancy and had unleashed a terrible evil inside the home, and that's what the Snedeker family is now experiencing. So the Warrens tell them that they are going to have to perform an exorcism on the home. They kick the Snedekers out of their own house and told them that it's not able to be lived in right now, that they need to do everything that they can, and they do perform an exorcism on the house. They claim that it cleaned the house, there are no more evil spirits there, and the home is now ready to be lived in by the family. But the Snedekers only lived in that house for 2 years before moving out, which that in of itself is something that people claim makes this story a little less believable, because personally, if I had creepy things happening in my house and then me and my husband were getting raped and sodomized in our sleep, I would be out that so quickly. But they chose to stay for 2 years, mainly because one of the Snedeker family's children was super sick with Hodgkin's lymphoma, and he had to be closer to the hospital he was getting treated. That was the whole reason that they had moved in the first place. I can't imagine they couldn't find somewhere else to live. And while the Warrens were at the house performing their exorcism and doing their investigation, they hired Ray Garton, an author, to basically document the entire process. The book was called A Dark Place, and it really helped spread the story of the Snedekers family home, and it was also part of how the Haunting of Connecticut movie was written. They based a lot of it off of what Garton had documented in the book. But if you were to ask Garton about it now, he does distance himself from this book because he himself does not believe the story. When the Warrens had hired him, they kind of gave him a brief overview of everything that they'd already experienced, and they wanted him to interview the Snedeker family. But the family kept changing their stories. No one's stories lined up, and he'd ask the husband the same questions and get different answers on different days. So he felt like they couldn't really keep their stories straight, but when he confronted the Warrens about this, they said, "Oh, don't worry about it, they're crazy, they've gone through a lot, you get the gist of it, just make up the rest and make it scary." So it's hard to tell with his book and with the Haunting of Connecticut story what's true and what's just fabricated by Garton. And after everything, the Snedekers were going on TV shows, they were talking to the media, sharing their story. They to this day still stick by their story and do not waver, and it obviously inspired the Haunting of Connecticut movie, but that doesn't mean that everyone really believes the Snedekers and the Warrens. And lots of people are very skeptical about how much truth there actually is behind the entire story. Families who've lived in the home after the Snedekers have claimed that they have experienced absolutely nothing of the paranormal type, and there's even conflicting reports about whether or not the house was really a funeral parlor beforehand. Depending on where you're reading, some people say that it was just something the Warrens made up to make the story sound more scary. Some people say that it really was a parlor home before the Snedeckers moved in, and that's why they were able to move in so cheap. The house is still standing with tenants living in it, and even those tenants currently living in it say that there's no record of the house being a funeral parlor. But putting that aside, Robert Ebert, who's a very famous movie critic, kind of said about this movie that whenever it comes to stories that are based on true events, you expect them to be sort of sensationalized and overdone for, the movie. But he said there's so many over-sensationalized parts in the Haunting of Connecticut film that it makes it hard to believe that any of it could be based on true events. And kind of like how we saw with the Amityville Horror, the movie does depict a lot of what the original family claimed to be experiencing. You always expect the movie to be a little bit more overdone than the original story just to make it a little bit more entertaining, but there was still at least enough of a base of a truth in the Amityville Horror that you could sort of believe those things happened. But so much happens in the Haunting of Connecticut movies, and with Garton coming out saying that he was told to make things up, it's really hard to determine how much of it is really based in truth. And the Snedecker family has made a good amount of money based off of their story. They've been on multiple TV shows, they've had their story covered on shows like A Haunting, obviously the movie rights that they were able to get with The Haunting of Connecticut. So some people speculate that maybe they did it just to be able to make some money, which if that's true, that's a pretty ballsy plan, and I mean, good for them that it worked. But honestly, I've seen The Haunting of Connecticut. I'm not really sure how much of it would be true, especially based on what I've read about the Snedeckers. I can't tell you how much of it I think is true or not, but I want to know what you guys think. Do you think this is just an over-sensationalized story by Ed and Lorraine? Do you feel like there might be some actual truth laid underneath of it? Or do you think the Snedeckers were just trying to get rich quick and decided to sell a crazy ghost story to the media? I'd love to know what you guys think. You can leave a comment down below or head over to my Instagram, What a Horror. I'll be making a post of this video as well. But as always, I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you want to see new videos, because I put out new videos every Friday. And until next time, stay spooky.